Welcome to the Top Order podcast. It is ICC Men's T20 World Cup 2024 watch on the show. Games coming thick and fast, 4 every couple of days or so. We've got some tears from Australia and England, West Indies hanging in there, USA hanging in there, and can South Africa continue their out of character, no choking policy? All coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, boys, we were together not so long ago. I think, mid of the week, New Zealand time. We're back again, end of the week, I guess, New Zealand time, Sunday night here to review some pretty decent games, actually, in terms of the last 4 instalments of this T20 World Cup. A little bit of a focus, I think, we'll find, given the personnel involved. Spoiler alert, we won't be talking too much about the Black Caps anymore on these shows over the course of the next week or so, but both Baldy and my teams in action. And then I guess we've also seen India continuing, I guess, what we expect to see from them, and this passage to, for them, a guaranteed semi-final for a primetime Indian TV audience, regardless of whether they finish first or second in their group. And we might come on to whether that's quite fair. But also probably we'll talk a little bit about the two host nations facing off against each other, and Australia, I was going to say, the United States really getting their first thumping of the tournament, which would have surprised some if you'd have said that, 3 or 4 weeks ago. But Stu, where do you want to open proceedings?
Well, why don't we go in reverse order as well, seeing as we did that last time, and it seemed to work reasonably well in terms of, I guess, the ones that are freshest on our memory. And I mean, I guess that leaves us with Afghanistan and Australia, as the place to start. And I mean, the scenes, I guess, coming out of these games, obviously, it was historic win against New Zealand in the pool play, and now it's a historic win against Australia. The Afghanistan fans have been fantastic in terms of the way that they've celebrated. But, really, it was a tremendous performance. I think, this morning, obviously, we saw India and Bangladesh play their game. And after that, India had qualified. And I think everyone had just written Australia in there as well and kind of gone, okay, well, India and Australia are going to qualify. And then, we're going to go into this last round. What are they both going to do? I started seeing some conversations about, whether India and Australia will be starting to sort of fox in that game. But now that game is super important particularly for Australia. So, yeah, I mean, Baldy, I sort of have a few questions around, little parts of that game. But, I mean, we may as well just come to you. I mean, how are you sort of tracking after that performance from Australia?
I'm riding a wave of different emotions, but I think the overwhelming emotion, if I put the parochial, one-eyed Australian cricket fan part of it to the side, it's a fantastic day in the history of world cricket. This is, to me, as important as Sri Lanka making it to the final of the 96 World Cup and then winning that ODI trophy. It's the emergence of yet another nation in a big tournament in world cricket. I love seeing an underdog succeed as much as anybody. And it's really difficult to be upset watching Afghanistan have tremendous success, even if it comes at the cost of Australia booking a berth in the semi-finals mathematically. Australia now have booked themselves what is effectively a quarter-final against India. It's a case of Australia having to win 3 on a bounce to win a World Cup. And we know that Australia have been there before and needing to win several games in a row to lift a major trophy. So Australia aren't out of it yet, but they've been handed a really, really important lesson of taking care of business when they have the opportunity to do so, because Australia had an opportunity to win this game today. They were in a solid position at multiple stages of the game. And you have to say that Afghanistan, yet again, outplayed a more fancied opponent on paper to take away the biscuits. And they've been just fantastic throughout this World Cup. And all their success, as far as I'm concerned, is really well-deserved.
What did you make of the team selection? Because that was one of the first things that I wrote down, actually, when I saw Ashton Agar bowling that first over. And obviously we might go into some of the fielding that happened in that game. And Agar didn't paint himself a beautiful picture in the field today. But I sort of felt personally that even, I guess over the last couple of months, 3 months, we've talked a bit about Starc, right? And how he hasn't been at his best. He's turned up for some big games, but he hasn't been at his best. He got pumped around in the IPL at various times. But I think in a game where you're playing Afghanistan and their openers are so key, I actually, their team, there's so many great parts about their team. But when I kind of think about them as, an overall contender, you just wish they had one or two more batters, because their openers are so crucial to how they go. And in a game like this, you think, you just play Starc and bowl him the first couple of overs up front and hope he gets one of those guys. And then that kind of goes enough of the way to sort of restricting Afghanistan. What do you make of that?
Oh, look, I could not agree more. If you have a look at the impact that he had in the Bangladesh game, he took a wicket in the first over. As you say, it's not a case of Afghanistan only having two good batters, because they've got good batters throughout their lineup, but they're world-class players. The players that can win them a semi-final or a final are Gurbaz and Zadran. They are the two key wickets. And if you could pick one bowler other than Jasprit Bumrah that you'd really want to bowl the first over, to swing the ball, to take a wicket early, it would absolutely be Mitchell Starc. I'm hopeful, having not seen any of the press or any of the news releases that Australia have put out in the last 48 hours, that he has some niggling injury. Because if we've left him out to pick Josh Hazlewood and Ashton Agar ahead of him in what could have been a semi-final ceiling performance, that is a massive mistake that Australia have made at the selection table. And normally they get it pretty right. Look, it looked great on paper that Ashton Agar bowled the first 2 overs and only conceded 2 runs. But the fact that, as I said it in the last podcast that we talked about, if Australia allow oppositions to build good partnerships between the 4th and the 10th over, which they did in this game, Afghanistan were 100 for none. Australia were looking down the barrel at having to chase almost 160 plus on that surface, which would have been the equivalent of 185, 190, I think, on a really good batting track. As it was, 140 was more than enough. So Australia really missed a trick as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, right? It's easy to say after the game that Australia should have picked Mitchell Starc, but it's not difficult to look at the importance of their opening batters and Mitchell Starc's ability to wreak havoc in the first over and say that Australia really missed him today. And if you have a look at the scorecard, Hazlewood didn't really do the job for Australia. I don't know what his figures are off the top of my head. None for 39 off of 4. You would think that Starc would pick up 1 wicket in the form that he's in. And even though Ashton Agar bowled 4 overs for 17, it's not, sometimes you got to get one. You got to get 1 or 2 in the power play, and Australia failed to do that, paid the price.
Yeah, Baldy, I think I was going to ask, a similar question, and I think you've covered a hell of a lot of it in your summation. But the toss as well is a puzzling one for me. We've seen in these day games that it's tended to get more difficult to bat in second in the day games. And I think, look, part of that is, did they make a little bit of a blunder from that perspective? But I also think we've got to give a massive amount of credit to Gurbaz and Ibrahim at the top of the order. Particularly, I think, Ibrahim didn't panic, even though, strike rate was somewhere around 100. I think, obviously, the conversations that they were having, and you showed in the running between the wickets that they were really putting that Australian fielding unit under a bit of pressure, stealing every single. And I think they knew how important every run was going to be. So I don't think they went out there going, do you know what, we're going to blast a massive power play and get 180 here. They batted so intelligently to give themselves the ability to, in the end, scramble from, what was it, 120 for 1 or whatever, when Gurbaz was out, to just eking out another 40 or so runs to finish pretty close to 150. But look, as you say, when you then look at the threat, you would have said leading into the tournament from an Afghan perspective would have been the 3 spinners, wouldn't it? Nabi and Khan and Noor Ahmed. But you look at not only this game but their performance so far in the tournament. Fazal Haq Farooqi, I think, is the leading wicket taker still. If he's not, he's pretty close. Yeah. And then obviously Gulbadin had a day out that he's going to be telling the grandkids about, and everybody down the gym on the bicep machine as well, as well as Naveen as well. So I think the selection blunder, and let's not dress this up in any other way. This was a selection blunder to leave Mitchell Starc out, unless, as you say, Baldy, he'd pulled a fetlock in the warm up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you have a look at this game, like we've said about Afghanistan throughout the tournament. They played the smarter cricket than their opposition in this game. They assessed the conditions better. The captain said that they would have batted first. That would have been a smart decision to bat first. I don't think there are many sides in this World Cup that have bowled first on this ground and won. In fact, I don't think any side that's bowled first on this ground, having won the toss, has won a game at that particular venue. So I think Australia, like England, prefer to chase, but sometimes you've just got to look at the conditions and sometimes look at the trends in what's going on in the game and think to yourself, well, if we're bowling early doors and it does move around a little bit, if there's a bit of nibble and we get one or two early doors, great. But also by the same token, I just think Australia have missed a trick in a couple of different departments here, and particularly the selections, but also the choice to bowl first, how we approached our batting innings, lots and lots and lots of little mistakes. And, you give a side like Afghanistan a sniff and they're going to take it now. They're well good enough to take those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, that they must have been a bit nervous there for a little while during that Maxwell and Stoinis partnership. It looked like Maxwell was going to be the hero against them, but I mean, Binksy said it before, Gulbadin. I mean, it was so weird, isn't it? Because he sort of hasn't really played a part, really. I mean, he's bowled a few overs, but it's not like he's been impactful with the ball. And then suddenly, he breaks that partnership, gets another one, and then Noor Ahmad takes that great catch at point to get Maxwell. And honestly, the great catches just keep coming after that. Gulbadin, I mean, Binksy, you referenced it just before, that the catch that he gets and then gives it gets the guns out. It's just fantastic as a neutral to see that happen.
Yeah, look, there was some. Yeah, look, I guess the fielding was actually mixed throughout the course of the evening. Australia didn't field well at all. And there were times when Afghanistan didn't feel particularly well. There was, several instances the ball being hit into the deep and it bursting through fielders' hands or taking a hop off that sandy outfield and ending up in the advertising hoardings. But they caught the really important catches at Afghanistan. Noor Ahmed's catch to get rid of Maxwell was quality. Keeper took a really good one over his shoulder as well. For a moment, it looked like there was going to be either three players colliding or three players pulling up short and the ball dropping in the middle of a perfect triangle. But yeah, look, I think what this goes to show is that, that probably, and we'll come on to it, USA, probably aren't going to be a chance of winning the tournament. But I think you could see a scenario where almost 6 of these 8 teams, if they lifted the trophy in a week or so's time, you wouldn't necessarily see it as a massive shock. And I think you've actually got to even say that if Afghanistan make the final, it wouldn't be a massive shock at this point. But Lippy, I am keen to come to you just to wrap up the Australia-Afghanistan piece with the permutations. Baldy's obviously trying to get the reverse Moz out pretty early. But to me, it looks as if Australia are pretty well set. There's even a scenario, unless my maths is horribly wrong, because obviously Afghanistan played Bangladesh as well, so there's all kinds of run rate permutations. Australia could even lose, couldn't they, to India and still get through, or could they not?
Afghanistan would have to lose to Bangladesh. So, I guess before we get into that, one last shout out to Pat Cummins, who gets another hat trick. And if it wasn't for all the horrible fielding, he could have had 4
yeah,
because Warner puts down that catch. But yeah, I mean, it has thrown this group totally wide open. I mean, Australia, to be safe, needs to win that game against India, which now, I mean, for India is a great opportunity. Like, I think that's you kind of could go, okay, well, India maybe don't care about that game, but I think for them must be like,
they do.
We've got a chance to knock Australia out of this competition. We're going to go hard, and we've got a free swing. It doesn't matter if we lose, but we've got a great chance to, I don't know, get revenge for the World Cup final, only a few months ago. So I think they'll be, red hot to try and win that game. But it does throw, Afghanistan, it even throws Bangladesh back into the mix here because,
Yeah.
they would have to beat Afghanistan by a long way, I think, and hope that India do the same to
31 runs. So, yeah, if India and Bangladesh win, obviously India will top the group with 6 points and everybody else will be on 2.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the permutation here is then Australia will need to lose by 31 for their run rate to slip below Afghanistan, and therefore Bangladesh will need to win by 31 for their run rate to sneak ahead of Afghanistan.
Wow.
But then they'll also need Australia to lose by a decent margin. So there's lots of, and that doesn't even factor in what happens if it rains at some point. And I think as we talk through these permutations, it's pretty much the same in the other group as well, isn't it? There's a lot of different ways that this can play out.
It could get very interesting.
Need a slide rule at some point.
Well, I think Afghanistan got to win their game against Bangladesh, which I think you'd back them to, and then it piles the pressure on it. And I guess fortunately for Afghanistan, that Australia-India game is first, so that Afghanistan's going to go into that final game, and Bangladesh, I guess, knowing exactly what they have to do. But yeah, it's probably a good time now to move on to I think the only team so far that has qualified for the semi-finals officially, and that is India, who, as we keep saying, they're sort of going about their business in a quiet kind of way, but they're doing the business really nicely. And I actually think that this game was, probably one of their better performances, and the fact that they're starting, I said last time they kind of ticked off a few things. They got Sky, really, some runs from him. People aren't going to love that Rohit got 20 and Kohli got 30, but I actually think that's a step forward. And same with Dube, the fact that he got, that he got some runs as well. And, it's not a lot, but, Rohit runs down the wicket, hits Shakib for that massive 6. That's come out of the middle. That's felt great. Kohli hit a couple of really nice ones that came right out of the middle and, held his form. Dube showed his power. I think this is huge for India. And like we just said, they're going to go into that game ball here against Aussie thinking we've got a great chance not only to, get some more players in form again, but to make a big impact on this tournament and actually get them gone so that we never have to play them again and take a big player out.
Absolutely.
Baldy, before you answer, do you also think they're going to rest anyone in India? Do you think they're going to go for foot on the throat and pick the best 11, or could you see them giving a few people a rest?
Oh no, I wouldn't see them giving anyone a rest. This is like now the winner of this World Cup has to go through India. If you're going to win this World Cup, you're going to have to go through India to do it, I think. If you have a look at that Indian side, what's most impressive about that scorecard against Bangladesh are the strike rates of the guys at the top of the order. They're all above sort of 130. Even Virat's 37 off 28 is a step in the right direction for him. And then you've got Shivam and Hardik coming in and finishing the job and doing a really good finishing job. So I don't think that they would rest anybody, particularly in that top 6. They've finally got some combinations that are starting to work for them. Their bowling unit is spot on. I think the combination of Kuldeep and Akshar and Jadeja, 3 spinners that they can throw at Australia is the right combination for them. If I was India, I wouldn't change anything for this game. They've got 3 seamers, 3 spinners they can throw at Australia, and a top 6 that's starting to perform. Man, Australia are going to have to be good to win that game because this Indian side is now red hot.
Bigsy, what do you make of the intent from these guys at the top of the order from India? Because there's been a bit made of that around the fact that, obviously these guys have been struggling, Rohit and Kohli, to actually put those runs on the board. But in a way, I'm pleased to see that they don't want to muck around. I mean, even though Rohit in the last game, I think his strike rate was under 100, he tried to hit pretty much every ball for a boundary. They are trying because they know we've got such power, and even depth now with Akshar in the side. We can't muck around. We are going to go hard, and they certainly did that in this game. Everyone that came in kind of tried to keep that momentum going. And I mean, in a way, I really do think that it's a positive, at least, that they're trying to play like that.
Yeah, look, I'm going to answer this question in a really weird way and refer listeners and watchers. Jump onto, Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and there's a very recent clip of 2 of the Birmingham Bears, who are the Warwickshire T20 outfit, two of their young guys having a range hitting competition. And essentially, the range hitting competition is sudden death. As soon as someone doesn't hit a six, the competition is over. And this is about an 8 or 9 minute YouTube clip with none of them missing hitting a six. Granted, off throwdowns, like, there's a guy with a dog stick, and then the rest of the guys are literally in the stand throwing back the cricket balls. Now, the reason I bring that out is that India played their first 4 games of this World Cup on a pitch that, let's be honest, wasn't conducive to range hitting. And we saw the intent that the Indian guys had, even playing those games in New York. Rohit and Virat went out with positive intent, didn't necessarily come off in terms of results. Rishad Pant as well, particularly in one of those games in New York, similar. As we get onto some better wickets, and I think that we saw that obviously in this outing for them, that's the game plan. It's the game plan that's worked for all of those guys over the last 17 months prior to the World Cup at the IPL. So, they've had a pretty decent window prior to this World Cup where they've played a lot of white ball cricket on good surfaces. And I think if they continue with that intent, there isn't anybody that's not going, I really hope they, get flu or gastro or, something, because it's going to be a monumental fluke if they don't win this tournament from here, with the quality they've got in the change room, and particularly at the top of the batting order.
Paul D, we've talked a little bit about the batting. We got to mention some of the leg spin on show in this game. Kuldeep, lovely. I mean, I could talk about him for a long time in terms of the flight and the pace that he's sort of developed now, but a lovely performance from him. I mean, when Bumrah bowls his 4 overs for 13, it sort of makes it a lot easier for the spinners to go about, having to attack. But I also enjoyed, and I've enjoyed all tournament, I sort of had a note down to mention it last time, but we didn't really get to it. Rishad Hossain from Bangladesh.
Yeah.
I think, one of the big positives from this tournament for them has been him, because I remember that ball that he bowled to Travis Head in the previous game to get to bowl him, and then Dube in this game. I think the pace that he bowled both of those deliveries, figured out exactly what to do, beat the batters in flight, and then even the bravery to do it, especially to Dube today in the moment that he did that. Yeah, really, really nice. So any more praise you want to throw on leg spinners? The floor is yours.
Oh, he's one for the future, Rashad. His coach at the moment is Mushtaq Ahmed. So if you want to talk about Asian leg spin coaches, he's one of the guys that you really want in your corner. And I was watching one of the asides during a rain delay, and Mushi was talking about how impressed he was, even though Rashad's only 21, 22 years old, how intelligent a bowler he is already, how he's able to vary his pace. We even saw in that Australia game, after he came out after the rain break, he slowed his pace right up. He took all the pace out of the ball. He was really difficult to handle in those conditions. Of course, he bowled Travis Head as well, as you said. So he's a guy that's got a really bright future for Bangladesh. They don't traditionally have many wrist spinners come through their systems, but he's come through with a really good head on his shoulders. Tactically, he's very good. He looks like he's got good control for a young fella. So if they're taking anything out of this World Cup, they should be thinking, well, he's our long-term number one spin option. And I don't want to say he should be their spin option in all conditions, but he looks like a guy who, from what we've seen in this tournament, could be an all-format player for Bangladesh for many, many years to come. Because if you think about leggies, they don't get good until they're 32, 33. He's got 11 more years of learning his craft before he really starts to hit his peak. So he's very, very exciting for me.
Binksy, I'm excited to talk about this England-South Africa game because it was a great one to watch, certainly from a neutral point of view. Obviously, England, didn't get across the line in the end, but I actually think the way that this sort of these two games, in that group over the last couple of days have played out, in a way, I almost think England I feel like they have. They're the team that I would back the most to make the semi-finals from their group after, how it's all played out. And I think if you're personally if I was an England fan, I wouldn't be too disheartened from what I saw. So how are you sort of tracking? I know, again, Baldy's called it, South Africa's winning all these close games, but England, I don't think, come out of that game too disheartened by the performance.
Yeah, and I think you'll have seen that, and it's been a feature of the way that they've talked to the press in all formats over the course of the last couple of years. That they very much concentrate on their own business. They don't get dragged into some of the narrative and deflect a lot of questions. But yeah, I think you've seen that positivity come out of that they've, Livingston and Brook have spent some time at the crease. If Brook had have probably had another 5 or 6 balls, it would have been a different story. If that catch had been given out with Quinton de Kock and Mark Wood in the first innings, that really was the turning point, and I think B the marquee performance in this game from QDK, as Danny Morrison likes to call him. Because he made that wicket look very different to everybody else that batted on it, probably with the exception of a little flourish from David Miller. And the question mark I've got for England, I think, Stu, is the experiment with playing the 2 express pace guys. We talked about this previously. For me, I think we look a better balanced side if we leave out Mark Wood and play the other all-round option in Chris Jordan. Because I think, Jordan can bowl one in their power play potentially. He can certainly bowl the middle overs and bowl pace off into the wicket, and he can bowl at the death as well. Whereas Mark Wood almost seems to be, we might use him to try and bring some express pace either up the top or in those middle overs. But he's not really done that job in this game. Reece Topley playing means that, and Moeen Ali taking the new ball meant he was only going to bowl the middle overs, and I think only bowled in the 14th over, his first over. So Wood feels like a little bit of a luxury in that side for me, and I do wonder whether or not England are thinking, if we'd have had Chris Jordan maybe coming in instead of Sam Curran or Jofra Archer, that's a slightly different complexion on things. But yes, on paper, I think England would be expected to beat the United States in their remaining game. And if they do it by even a pretty moderate winning margin, it looks as if they would make their way into the semi-finals. But, and there is a big but, there's still a number of permutations where that isn't the case. And realistically, there's still also, with only a game to go, that chance that it rains and you're on the plane home. So there's still a massive amount of jeopardy for all of the teams, bar India, who've, as we said, secured their place in the semi-finals. If the umbrellas are out in any of these games, there could be someone going home that either feels they don't deserve to go home, or the fans wouldn't want to see go home at this stage. Yes, this stage in the tournament.
I want to talk about the finish a little bit more because it was very did get pretty squeaky bum time for both sides, I think, at various points. But I think, Baldy, it's probably worth giving. I mean, Binksy touched on it just before, but giving a few more flowers to Quinton de Kock. He was fantastic in this game. I think, even in the game before, it really looks like he's come out and decided to be really assertive with what he's going to do. Positive footwork, trying to dominate the bowling in that power play, particularly into the leg side. Fantastic innings from Quinton de Kock. And if he's firing at the top, they're just a completely different team if they've got someone going for it, because on the other side, Reza Hendricks seems like he's really struggling, and I don't quite know what they're going to do and whether they're going to have to make a change there.
Yeah, the top order struggled a little bit in group play for South Africa. Quinton de Kock didn't make a huge impact in group play. They had a lot of low-scoring games at a lot of low-scoring venues, but now you see the improvement in the quality of the wickets to a certain extent, and the pace and bounce starts to play into Quinton de Kock's favour. And as you said, much more decisive with his footwork, much more decisive in terms of his intent, and all of a sudden he becomes the danger man in the South African lineup. So he's a key wicket going forward for any side that wants to topple South Africa. And I think Reza Hendricks at the moment, Aiden Markram to a lesser extent, are weak links in that side, but both players are explosive. Both players have got pretty good international records. And so it's a case of, every time someone comes out to bat for South Africa, they're a dangerous player. And I think it makes that side very, very difficult to get on top of.
Well, Binksy, you started to believe at the end there when Livingston and Brook were in. I said to everyone on the last show, they got to get Bartman back in there, and then he bowls that over pretty much as entirely of full tosses. I mean, for his sake, I hope he hasn't lost it, because those kind of things are hard to get back. And it did seem by the end of that over that his confidence had sort of just totally gone, which isn't the greatest sign, moving forward in this tournament for them. But, they were on track to get that home. I think, like you said, you must have been believing we're going to do this.
Yeah, for a really, really short period of time. I think for a pretty decent point of the game. So Brook batted 5, I think. So he came out, 3 for 50 or thereabouts, with probably a dozen or so overs to go. And he's a good enough player to come in those situations. I think he's a good enough player to bat anywhere between 1 and 7 in that England lineup. Didn't hit a single ball over the rope. Everything was all of his boundaries were fours. What I thought was really probably the key, if we make it through to the semi-finals, is that both him and Liam Livingstone have faced some deliveries out in the middle. Almost it was the ability for them to almost have a little bit of a net and see if they could get themselves back in the game by taking it as deep as possible. Help them to then get in a position where it was 30 off 25 or thereabouts, and couldn't get over the line. I think Liam Livingstone had faced something like a dozen balls since he'd been in the Caribbean. So you'd face more on an all-inclusive honeymoon than that, wouldn't you? So that's probably the important thing for me. And I think they've probably also stumbled on the right batting lineup as well. Will Jacks was up at the top of the order as that kind of spare impact player or whatever. When you've got Johnny Bairstow and Moeen Ali, if there's a matchup to bat at 3, I don't think you then need Will Jacks. And realistically, is he going to bowl ahead of Livingstone? Probably not. And it, again, gives England the opportunity to get one of those other all-rounders in. Arguably, as I mentioned earlier, we could even get another one in if we left Mark Wood out. So for a short period of time, I was actually believing, but didn't quite make it over the line.
Anything else on this England-South Africa game before we sort of touch on the permutations, I guess, and move into the West Indies game?
Yeah, look, I've got a question for you on South Africa's bowling. We've seen Shamsi come in and out. We've seen Markham bowl the odd over, and on Bartman, I think that he's a bowler that wants to hit a decent length, isn't he? And I don't think that this pitch suited his natural length. And I don't know what he was trying to do. Whether he's trying to go for Yorkers and missing them by miles. That can be the only explanation really in that over that got pinged. But I suppose the question for me is really what they do with this bowling balance. Is it as simple as Bartman and Shamsi are the two that change in and out, and they've got the right lineup outside of that, or would you do anything differently?
Well, I said last time I don't have a huge amount of faith in Marco Jansen. Again, I think that's just personal preference. But I mean, probably I think though, as you said, those two are the two that are interchangeable in terms of depending on the pitches and all this stuff. I'm really fascinated to see. This is looking ahead because obviously South Africa now have to win this game against the West Indies that they have overnight. But I think looking forward, the two semi-final berths or venues, they in the pool play were places where the pitches were pretty tough going. Yeah, they weren't pitches that were easy to score off. So if that's the case, then maybe that brings someone like Shamsi certainly back into the mix. Although Bartman was superb on some of those pitches too. So that might cause a bit of a rethink about what all sides are going to do, I suppose, going forward. But I don't know, tricky decision for them, and I think they're going to have to be. It's going to be a key one because this West Indies South Africa game is so crucial now because of what the West Indies did against the USA, and such a great run rate boost for them. It means that, basically England, I think, touched on it before. If England can beat the USA by not even that much, then they'll push their run rate above South Africa's, and they play first. And then, essentially that West Indies South Africa game shapes up as somewhat of a quarterfinal that the loser could well be out, even though South Africa's obviously got to this point. They've won 6 from 6, I think, is it? They could, they could lose one of these games and suddenly just be out of the tournament.
Yeah, we've seen that in a World Cup somewhere else recently, haven't we? So yeah,
we have indeed. The USA West Indies game, I think for me probably the least interesting. I have to say these Super 8 games on these better pitches have been much better, and for me as a viewer, and I think showcases what a shame it was that some of those pitches early on were not that great. I think this has been much better viewing for us, kind of hitting that sweet spot that Raj pinpointed early on in the tournament, the kind of 140 to 180 sort of range. You do get a much better, I think, game of T20 cricket. I think that's definitely been shown out by the quality of the cricket in this Super 8s. But yeah, what do we want to hit on in the Western? Because Hoos and Kumar, reasonable performances for the US, but really, blown out of the water, as Binksy touched on right at the start of the show. And then Shai Hope just went bananas, and it was game over pretty early on in that innings.
Yeah, I really like sorry, you go ahead, Adam.
You go, Baldy.
I really like the addition of Shai Hope in place of King. I know there's a great sort of King Charles opening combination, and there's all sorts of puns and stuff that you can go with that. But just Shai Hope's record speaks for itself. He's one of those rare cricketers that has terrific average in all 3 formats. He's probably not the West Indies' preferred T20 sort of opener or number 3, but you just saw the impact that he had just coming into that side. And I think they look far more dangerous with he and Johnson Charles at the top of the order. And then you've got, Puran, Pal, Russell, Rutherford, even Roston Chase is one of the guys where I wouldn't have had him in the West Indies T20 squad, but he's been able to do the job with bat and ball. So West Indies aren't out of it. And I know it shapes up as being a quarterfinal between the West Indies and South Africa, but even though South Africa have been in great form, you just look at how many match winners are in that West Indies side, and you absolutely cannot write them off. It's actually the next round of games. It's the game that I'm looking forward to watching the most as a neutral player. Put the Australia-India game aside, that's the game that I'm most looking forward to, because it like the Australia-India game, shapes up as a real quarterfinal.
Yeah,
Binksy, over to you, mate.
Stu, for me, that game, I think, I mentioned it earlier on, I think USA have done well, I think, obviously, to get to where they've got in the tournament. And I don't mean that to sound patronising at all. No one would have picked them to be in the Super 8s. And probably no one would have picked them to be a chance in the Super 8s. And I think, England will be going into the game against them tonight or tomorrow. Genuinely, I'm sure they're looking at the videos now and doing their analysis, and they're really going. There's 4 or 5 guys here that could have an impact and make this more than a potential banana skin game. We look at Corey Anderson. A lot of players would have looked at him. I think at one point held the record for the fastest white ball 100. Probably doesn't anymore, but he hasn't really performed throughout the course of this tournament massively. Yes, that they didn't get the runs out of the top order, and I think they really would have relied on Taylor and Hoos and Kumar and Aaron Jones, who obviously burst onto that scene in that first game of the tournament. But the biggest thing for me to take away from this is the West Indies. As Baldy mentioned, the one note I'd actually made in preparation was around Shai Hope. He averages over 50 in ODI cricket. Somewhere around 25 in T20 cricket. And I think there's room for a player of that nature. And he makes that batting lineup just look a lot more solid than it did previously, I think. There might have even been a call for Mayers to come in, given some of his Caribbean Premier League and brief, IPL heroics as well. But look really, really good, I think. And that improves the balance of that side. I'm surprised he doesn't keep wicket as well, because I think he's a better keeping option than Pooran, but maybe save that for another day. And then I think the other thing that we've talked a lot about their bowling. Darren Sammy brought that side together as a captain, 4 or 5 years ago. He now really seems to be coaching and making very, very good decisions in terms of the makeup of this side. Getting Obed McCoy in when it kind of looks like it works. Clearly, from a spin perspective, they've got their bases covered. Akil Hussain and Moti have been sensational. And then they've got guys, 3 or 4 guys that bowl 85 mile an hour plus, and then who have a lot of T20 franchise experience. So I just think they've been tremendously well coached. They look together. And as Baldy mentioned, they've got match winners all the way down the card. So whilst this probably is a bit of a quarterfinal for them, realistically, that's the stage of the tournament we're at now. You are 3 games away from holding the trophy, which by definition is, a quarter, a semi, and a final. And just really glad there's no 3rd, 4th place playoff to bugger things off.
Totally. Look, nothing much more from me to add. I mean, you touched on it before, Corey Anderson. Continuing the form of the New Zealand batters in this tournament. I'd love to see him, fire a shot in this last game. But yeah, like you, Bully, these last few games of this group. Well, I was going to say pool play, but it's now Super 8 pool play. They've shaped up perfectly. That there's still so much on the line for these last couple of games. So yeah, just delighted and looking forward to these games finishing up.
Fantastic. And the other bit of food for thought I've got is just how many games is the IPL? 84 games or something like that. We're coming up to match 50 inside a really, really condensed period of time. We'll obviously get to whatever it is, match 55 or 56, whatever the final is. Maybe have a look at the format of this tournament if you're running a franchise league around the world, because you can fit some fantastic cricket into a pretty decent window. But we've got USA and England coming up tomorrow, I think 2:30 a.m. New Zealand time. So that will be over and done with by the time you tuck into your overnight oats or your wheat bix in the morning. We've then got West Indies, South Africa, 12:30 in New Zealand, match 50 in that Super 8s group. We will be back in your feed probably on Tuesday night, New Zealand time, to wrap up those games and the next 2 after that as well. So 4 game bursts as we approach the semi and the semis and the final of this ICC Men's T20 World Cup from the USA and the Caribbean. But for now, it is good night and God bless from us here in Auckland, New Zealand. We'll see you on the next episode of the Top Order Podcast. See you later.